everyone, and welcome to another edition of Harbour from Home. My name is David Burnell. I'm the Special Events Coordinator at Discovery Harbour, and today we're going to be talking about War of 1812 British headgear. During the War of 1812, there were various types of headgear, and officers as well as troops could be identified on the field by the headgear that they're wearing, specifically the plume or the hackle that they had in their headgear, or referred to as a shako that they would refer to it at the time period. The first two shakos that we have, or headgear, the one on my left is a private's shako made out of felt, and it has a hackle, a wood hackle, and this one has a red and white one. And of course, the officers, this is called the Belgique Shaco, which came in about mid-War of 1812 up to just before about 1820, has a plume, which more officers, because officers at this point in time had more money, more prestige, and also at this point in time, you bought your rank in the regular British Battalion Army. So if you were a ensign, lieutenant, captain, you tended to purchase your rank at this point in time, and therefore could afford a little more money, which means more, fancy dressing, and of course some courting and stuff on the hat as well. During the War of 1812 and into the post-war of 1812, and actually through basically the 19th century, there were identification markers on the British headgear. Red and white, either a plume or a hackle, signified that was a battalion troop. So that was the core of the British Army. And if I was an officer during the field and came upon a troop and they were wearing a red and white hackle or plume, I could tell they were a battalion troop, and I can give them orders specifically for that specific troop. There are a couple of other colors of hackles as well. The next one would be a green one. So either a green hackle or a green plume. And this signifies light infantry. And the same thing. I could come on a troop and see that they are green hackles or green plume, and I can give them proper orders on the field. And the light infantry were a flank unit, so you'd have a battalion in the center. You would have light infantry on one of the flanks, and they were a little more elite troop, independent thinkers as well, and they would be spread out in order to make sure we weren't being flanked by the enemy. They are being sent out as light troops to scout ahead to see if they're where the enemy is, and they also would act as pickets as well. So green for light infantry, red and white for battalion, and they would also have a bugle on their shako or headgear as well. Bugle, they used bugle calls for light infantry because the officer who was in charge, or officers in charge, because they would be so spread out on the flanks sometimes, they would not be able to hear the voice calls. So the officer would relay the call to the bugler. Bugler would do the appropriate call for what they need, and then hopefully the light troops would hear it and correspond appropriately. So red and white battalion, green for light infantry. The second one is, the third one is a white plume, and this would signify the grenadiers. Grenadiers were the hardcore, elite, most trained troops of the British battalion, and they would be on the other flank. So battalion in the middle, grenadiers on one side, light infantry on the other, and they were there to protect the flanks, as well as being usually maybe held in reserve sometimes to, fight that hardcore, or if the battle's not going, to fill in a gap as well. So the grenadiers wore white, red and white for battalion, and of course green for the light infantry. There would also be a plate on each shako. This is King George III cipher. So you would have that cipher, or this one, which of course came in with the Belgique Shaco, as I showed you on the officers' shako. King George III was the reigning king from the early 1760s right up to 1820. And all the headgear, because you're fighting for the king, would have the king's cipher at the time on their shako and identified at that point in time. So now, there is one other color, too, that you tended to avoid. This would have been the black plume. So the black plume is the sergeant at the time. So if you're going to see the sergeant, usually that means things aren't going well, you've been shot, you're ill, etc. And of course, compared to modern medicine today, surgery or medicine during the Napoleonics into the early 19th century and throughout the 19th century would have been moderate, at least in regards to that. So avoiding the surgeon with the black plume was the best thing that you could do. So once again, we're going to summarize. Of course, we have the hackle, red and white, plume, red and white, battalion troops. We have light infantry troops with green. And then finally, we also have the grenadiers that would wear the white plume. The Royal Artillery also wore a white plume, but they wore a blue jacket, which was also very distinguishing during the War of 1812 as well. So there's your recap, and that concludes another Harbour from Home. Thank you very much.